So the digital figure sculpture course, this is what we're here to talk about, right? So what are we going to do for the next 10 weeks? Well, what I want to kind of impart to you guys over the 10-week course is something that I call constructive naturalism, which is knowing exactly what we want to build from the inside out. So having a strong sense of construction, so strong sense of skeleton, a strong sense of anatomy, and being able to build it from our minds, so sculpt what you know, but then to give it the naturalism that comes with observation. So there kind of is a combined approach that we're trying to achieve. One old school would say, just sculpt what you see. And then there's also the people who say, just build what you know, right? But we're going to try to combine the two so that we can get the best of both. We can get the freedom of construction, so we can construct whatever we can imagine, but then we're going to ground it in reality with reference and with knowledge of the finer forms of the figure. So some of our inspirations for this kind of stuff are people like Bridgman, right, who were all about construction. And we're going to take his stuff and some of the fundamentals that he kind of does so beautifully with his drawings, and we're going to apply kind of the level of naturalism over top of it, right? So we really want to understand all the anatomy and the forms that it creates, the volumes it creates, but then we really have to kind of impose that sense of realism on it. So we need to put skin over top of it, we need to put fat over top of it, we need to put wrinkles on it, we need to get the small planes just right. And so what I've endeavored to do for the course, to build resources for you, to give you the tools to really analyze these things for yourselves and to learn, is I've gone out and I've shot and I continue to shoot all sorts of model reference for you, right? So if we're looking at this, we really want to see what this is, but what does this look like in life? What does the latissimus dorsi going up to insertion look like in life? So we're going to get this, and we're going to get this from kind of 360 degrees, right? So on the turntable. So we'll get all these views, and this is what we're going to be sculpting, right? We want to see how all this appears in different views, different angles, different articulations, because that's kind of where we need to build our sculptural knowledge, right? So we've got this guy here, we've got this guy here, right? So what do all these things do? They have all these different forms coming down, overlapping, and Bridgman shows us, guides us that way, and we've talked about a lot of this stuff on the anatomy course for people who have been there, and we'll review it, and then I'll show you how to sculpt it as well. Okay, just to switch things up, some of the reference is lit with different conditions than you would normally think to highlight different planes, because lighting is everything to sculpture. What is sculpture without light? It's like the Dark Ages. You can't see anything. There is no form without light. So the two interact, and you need to be able to assess everything and learn about planes under different lighting conditions. Okay, so that's where we're going with this idea of constructive naturalism. Okay, so how is the course structured? Well, broadly speaking, we're divided into halves, like I said in the introduction. So in the welcome video, 1 to 6, the first roughly half of the course, we're going to focus on parts of the body, right? So we're going to be talking about the torso, then we're going to talk about torso and shoulders, then we're going to talk about the arms, look at the forms of the arms and the elbow under different articulations. So what does an arm look like pronated or supinated? What does an elbow look like fully contracted and fully extended? Those are the things we're going to have to sculpt, because I want you guys to learn all these different articulations and the forms they create. Hands, we'll dedicate a whole week to hands, just doing hands and more hands, because it's critical. It's the kind of thing that you don't do until you're forced to do them, and on that point we're going to do a lot of feet, because people have to do feet to become comfortable with them, and mostly people throw shoes on or ignore them. We'll do legs, we'll do hips. Again, everything will be there in different articulations, so that's what we want to do, and we're going to call these fragments. So we'll do weekly fragments. We'll have occasional drawing exercises, which will be exercises to kind of give you a shortcut to learning some of these forms. And we're going to work on silhouettes, so how forms overlap and interlock on the body as you kind of go down, something simple like an arm or hand. These are things that you learn from drawing that you need to kind of know. I'll orient you with the nipple. So we'll do drawing exercises, and some of that will be Barg stuff. I'll show you a few Barg images for people who haven't seen them. Let me spell it correctly. We'll do a few construction exercises and other drawing things. Okay, so finally, we will schedule in, as we get closer to 4 and 6, some full figure sketches, right? So we will start to do pose, probably Z-sphere models, and rough them in, try to establish some broad volumes, kind of excluding the details. These will be timed, focused figure sketches to just get balance and proportions right. Okay, so that brings us to fragments, right? What are we going to do with these fragments? Well, we're going to build things like this. This is quite a famous torso for people who have ever done any kind of classical studying, like drawing Barg plates. People have copied this many, many times. But the idea is that we're going to do studies like this, pieces and parts, to the exclusion of worrying about portraits, to the exclusion of worried about detailed hands, detailed feet, which can be distracting and can ruin your focus on what's really important week to week. Okay, so just a few other fragments. And Rodin did fragments all the time. He carried around clay with him, and he did little studies of arms, hands, legs, feet, and he's kept them all, and they've all been cast into plaster, and you can see them in Paris if you want. But they're just a great way to learn, and that's why we're going to kind of adopt this approach. And at the end, I hope to have from everybody a kind of a nice collection of fragments that we can put on a little virtual board and do some nice renders of, right? So everybody will have their collection of studies, and it will look like a nice coherent collection in the end. Okay, and this is one that you guys will become familiar with very soon. This is our first fragment from week 1, so it's going to be a study, and this is actually a working example that I walked through. So in this first week, you'll see me do the entire thing for you. And so we'll talk about all the techniques, and we'll analyze the anatomy and get you guys started this way. But this is the idea. Okay, so week 7 to 10, this is where we start to get into our full figures, right? So we're going to take everything that we learned in the first half of the course, and we're going to apply it to the full figure, right? So hopefully by then we'll have developed the sensitivity and the knowledge of how to construct form, and we can just apply it directly to building out complete poses and taking them to refining them to the best level that we're able. Okay, so we'll continue with a few figure sketches weekly, right? So these are going to be timed, short things. They're not going to be finished. I don't want people to spend too much time on them, because this is where we're going to put our time in, is our full figure sculpts for man and woman. And finally, we'll end off in this latter half with some lectures on face and portraiture, and also how to address cloth and cloth elements. Okay, so I'll mention a little bit about course resources. The primary resource for you guys going forward is models and photographic reference of models, because that's where we're going to base this all on. Right, this is not a course about building from the imagination, though we're going to get to that in the end of the course. That's where we want to be, but we need to know what to build first. Right, so my goal is to provide you guys with the best reference possible for learning this stuff. Okay, so there's other reference out there everywhere on the internet, but what I'm giving you guys, in addition to just sets of figures on a turntable, is hopefully I'm giving you really good lighting conditions, a good specular layer. Everybody kind of gets an oil layer before they get photographed. You get close-ups, detailed close-ups from different angles, so that we can really negotiate all the subtleties when it comes down to final figures. Look at all these subtle plane changes. We really want to be able to capture those. And so we need to have good reference, and that's it. That's going to be one of my primary capacities for you is the provider of solid reference. Okay, so models on turntables, close-ups from different angles, and also measurements. All right, so this is going to be big. This is something that you would have access to if you were working in a studio environment. So if you were actually sculpting a figure in clay and you had a model in, you would be measuring them with calipers, right? You would caliper, this distance, acromion to the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. You might measure this distance across the shoulder, right? Acromion to acromion, or humor. The first one was right here, right? So I've taken all these measurements for you, and there's about 35 for the bodies and about 25 for the heads. Okay, so each model that's going to be in the repository will have a corresponding model sheet with their measurements. Other stuff that's in the courseware are outlines and silhouettes for you to study from, and these are the Bargue drawings that I was mentioning, the Charles Bargue drawings, and these are beautiful figure drawings, and what's really nice about them is that they capture these sort of overlaps just in silhouette. They capture all these inflections where planes transition as they go into profile, right? And these are one of the tools we use to figure out if our volumes are doing the right thing, if our planes are interlocking correctly. We rotate our model around and we look to see if, hey, is the bicep really going underneath the deltoid, right? Am I getting that inflection right there, that interlock? Likewise, are we getting this? All these things are critical to understand, and these Bargue drawings are perfect for analyzing that, right? So, look what we have here. Everybody should be able to go through this by the end of the course and really be able to see where the planes are going and understand what's happening with these overlaps, right? Because they all are things that we'll have to capture. Like, you may not consider yourself as somebody who draws, but you have to understand these things. Whether you can represent it faithfully with pencil or not is a different thing, but we'll have exercises built around kind of studying this sort of information. Okay, other resources, contours, right? So this is what the body does when it goes into profile, but what happens in here, right? What happens in here? How do we know, how do we really study what those planes are? And I've built up a little library of projections, planar projections onto models to try to give you guys another channel of information for studying the transition of form, because really it's the most elusive of thing to understand, and I think that everybody who works digitally has a good understanding of lines and contour lines, because it's kind of part and parcel of the material that we work with. And so I think this is a pretty nice correlation to help you really understand, how these things work and how you should look at them when you're sculpting, right? What is the convexity of the pectoralis major? It's something like this, right? And if you look at kind of the latitudinal lines, you can start to see the roundness going around the body, right? So hopefully these will be useful to you, and I will be adding more as the course goes to just kind of make it a complete set. But these should be useful. I find them useful to look at myself, and somewhat kind of illuminating, just to confirm what I understand about the planes already. So here's another example. What happens in the biceps when it's pronated versus when the hand is pronated versus supinated. So prone means palm down, right? So what happens? The bicep stretches and is really long. We know that mostly from the anatomy course, right? So long biceps here. So the tendon dives right in between here. So you can see going like this. What happens when you supinate? So his hand is face up here. Look at me. I'm going to draw a little hand. It's going to go off screen so you can't see it. I'm going to have to redo this just for effect. Right, so his hand is going to be right here. It's a little cartoon hand, palm up, right? And the bicep shortens, right? So we're looking at a huge variation of form, and hopefully by looking at the contour gallery you can kind of understand the transitions and how you would go about sculpting this. Okay, a couple more examples. Just forms on a female as well as males, right? Obviously this is kind of interesting. Different forms in the forearm going over and under the ulnar furrow. The convexity of the anconeus, interesting. Obviously boobs are kind of interesting as well. The breasts, how kind of straight down this contour line is, rounds out and then dips under. So hopefully very useful. Another thing that I've shot a lot of feet with contour lines to give you a really good idea about the arch of the foot, right? How convex all this stuff is, and how it breaks down. How round are the toes in reality? Are they flat? Are they round? We have hands in there. We have feet, ankles, knees, legs, bums, backs. Pretty much all of the stuff that's good, important to understand is what I've tried to capture. Okay, so I hope that's going to be a lot of valuable resources for you to help us progress. And I will work through examples for you week to week. We'll have lectures that describe the anatomy that's important to the different regions that we're studying. And we'll talk about the forms. And collectively, we're going to learn a lot in 10 weeks. Okay? So, week to week assignments. You will upload those to Dropbox for the full enrollment students, and Dropbox will be where I download them from, and that's where I'll upload your feedback videos as well. You will get an email from me with the invite and locations for that. You'll have to study up on Dropbox if you haven't used it before, but it's pretty simple. It's the best way to exchange files. Okay, so weekly, you guys will get video feedback from me, the full enrollment students. The most constructive and useful of those feedback videos will go online for everybody to study from. So I expect kind of a range in usefulness in the feedbacks. Some people will need more, some people will need less, some will need different. So I'll try to get a good spectrum of that feedback and upload it. Okay, so use figure.sculpture@scotteaton.com. Remember the dot, remember the dash, and I will correspond with you all from that address. Use the forums on the courseware to exchange ideas. I hope to get ideas from you as well as me giving you ideas. People out there have a lot of experience with ZBrush, and I by no means know everything about it. So I'm really interested to hear your workflows and your techniques as well. Okay, so let's get started into week number 1.